as a victory!
Just kidding, I wouldn't subject you all to that. But it is time for another coaster showdown, and this one has been highly requested. This one is the battle of the 4 across inverting thrill coasters at Australian parks. In one corner we have Green Lantern coaster at Movie World. It may live quite literally in the shadow of the bigger coasters at the park, but does this funky S&S El Loco stack up when compared with other coasters around the country? Its opponent today is Abyss at Adventure World, the Gerstlauer Eurofighter that put the park well and truly on the Aussie enthusiast map back in 2013. Certainly Western Australia's biggest and baddest roller coaster. Can it win this battle against an opponent from the East? Welcome to another coaster showdown, and without further ado, let's get started. Round 1, the stats. S&S only ever built 6 of their El Loco model, and Green Lantern was the only one of the larger model with 4 across seating. That made it one of the steepest roller coasters in the world upon its opening, with a first drop angle of 120.5 degrees. It stands 33 meters tall with 488 meters of track and a top speed of 66 kilometers an hour. It boasts 2 inversions, a dive loop with spectacular hang time, and a spiraling inline twist. Certainly modest stats for a thrill coaster, but it's all about those funky elements. Abyss, for my UK viewers, is very similar in terms of its layout to Soar the Ride at Thorpe Park, so a lot of these stats may seem familiar. The layout is custom and slightly varied from Soar though, standing 30 meters tall with 630 meters of track and a top speed of 85 kilometers an hour. It features 3 inversions, an inline twist, an Immelman, and a dive loop. Its drop is also beyond vertical, reaching 100 degrees. Putting these stats side by side, it really is a toss-up. Green Lantern certainly has the more significant headlining stat with that record-breaking drop angle, but the increased track length, the added inversion, and the extra top speed put Abyss slightly ahead overall. And for that reason, I'm giving the point to Abyss. Once we remove the stats from the context that Green Lantern's drop is so unique, there certainly is one coaster whose stats are stronger. Abyss leads 1-0. Round 2, the theming. To steal a phrase from my good friend Ejector Beartime, Green Lantern is perhaps the prime example of the Six Flagsification of Movie World. During the late 2000s and throughout the 2010s, Movie World got a little bit addicted to the DC Comics theming, and unfortunately, rather than that resulting in more excellent and intricate superhero-themed rides like Superman Escape, the park resorted to vaguely stylized rides and cut-out theming plastered onto their coasters. Green Lantern's queue features a few basic comic panels and sculptures of Green Lantern characters, and that's really it. The only other thing that could be considered an element of theming is the LED lighting of the Green Lantern logo on the coaster structure, which admittedly does look great at night. But the entire package is one of the least themed and most bland looking rides in the park. Abyss is an interesting case because its story from the very beginning is one of quite the opposite of a Six Flagsification. Adventure World put a lot of effort into writing a storyline behind Abyss, and that became evident in the ride's promotional material for its opening. They really went all out. But the end product has a lot of the same problems as Green Lantern, unfortunately. Sculptures of cloaked figures and some spooky graveyard ambiance before you enter the ride station, which is pretty much just a shed. There was a real opportunity for something to be done with the darkened first section of the ride, and it just never was. I'm calling this category a tie. These are 2 rides with such theming potential that is just never really met, and the actual effort put into the theming is fairly minimal on the part of both parks. I would maybe lean towards Abyss for the promotional materials and the storyline behind it, but that's a little bit like Green Lantern's onboard audio. It just doesn't exist anymore and hasn't for a long time. Abyss still leads 1-0. Round 3, the trains. A little while ago I rode my second El Loco, which was Mumbo Jumbo at Flamingo Land. The 2 across El Loco cars feature a rather bizarre restraint with a lap bar and an over-the-shoulder pad. These things absolutely suck, really making the hang time very uncomfortable. But S&S nailed it with the 4 across cars. These feature a freeing over-the-shoulder lap bar restraint that really allows you a lot more upper body freedom. It emphasizes the hang time a lot better and is extremely comfortable. They also look pretty sleek, although their upkeep has struggled sometimes. Abyss, meanwhile, yikes. Gerstlauer's over-the-shoulder restraints really are the only drawback about their Eurofighter model, because for a coaster with such great potential for forceful, compact and dynamic layouts, They very quickly become headbangers, and Abyss is no exception. Gerstlauer are very guilty of adding hard OTSRs that sit directly at ear level just to make sure you get a real beating every time you ride. Now, I think Abyss's cars look fine and go with the black track, but there's a clear winner based on restraint design alone. One of these coasters has comfortable and freeing restraints, the other has restrictive restraints that headbang relentlessly. A clear point for Green Lantern. The matchup is tied at 1-1. Round 4, the operations. Green Lantern has some really interesting issues with its operations, and I would say it maybe suffers the most under VRTP's management out of any of the coasters at Movie World. Sure, it's frustrating that Superman and DC rivals are so slow and have an awful habit of running one train, but Green Lantern is designed to run with 4 trains at a time. It has low capacity trains and should be aiming for fast dispatches. They never get those dispatches. I think the 4 across seating presents its own challenges with handling guests and their loose items, but VRTP just also really do not operate this thing at anywhere near the capacity it should be reaching, and to me it seems to be a procedure thing. I didn't get too much of a sense of how Abyss operates since my only visit to Adventure World came on a relatively quiet day and lines were minimal, but they were running only 2 cars, and I understand this to be a reasonably frequent thing. That's ridiculous. For a ride that is designed with the capacity to, again, run multiple trains at a time, they could be doing a whole lot more. The procedures seem to be more efficient than Movie World's, but I haven't really seen them in action, and I haven't seen enough to suggest it should get the point. I'm calling this one a tie. I would say that my experiences with both coasters have suggested that the parks are not really running either coaster to its true potential, and while crowd sizes might have impacted that in the case of Abyss, I wouldn't call either of these coasters particularly well operated. The matchup remains tied at 1-1. Round 5, the Forces. This is a very interesting category for this matchup because these coasters are very different. When it comes to Forces, Green Lantern's greatest strength is its hang time. The layout itself is not particularly fast-paced and focuses more on the slow moments than the fast, particularly in the dive loop, which is one of the strongest moments of hang time anywhere in Australia. There are also some very nice laterals, and the first drop is rather forceful as well. Abyss provides a small moment of hang time through its inline twist, but the majority of the forces are actually positives and airtime. The ejector airtime over the first drop and the airtime hill are extremely powerful, and the layout is very tight and rapid, producing some wonderful moments of positive G-force. In fact, I would describe Abyss's ride experience as one of the most intense in the country after the Beyond Vertical drop. For me, this point has to go to Abyss. While Green Lantern's forces are one of a kind, Abyss is far more powerful. It packs a serious punch, not to mention that airtime being some of my favourite airtime moments in the country, if not for those over-the-shoulder restraints restricting them so much. Abyss takes the lead, 2-1. Round 6, the layouts. The El Loco layout may be off the shelf, but it's one of the many reasons that I believe Alan Schilke to be something of a madman. There's no denying that the El Loco's layout is creative. It fits a compact footprint and manages to produce a reasonably well-rounded, albeit slightly short, ride that emphasizes unique forces and elements. For its uniqueness and variety alone, I actually consider the standard El Loco layout to be quite strong for what it is, mixing together inversions, the Outer Bank turn, and the Beyond Vertical first drop. It's particularly bizarre. Abyss has strengths and weaknesses when it comes to its layout. I certainly consider Abyss's layout to be more complete than Green Lantern's, but it's also more disrupted and broken up and certainly less unique. I'd say it also offers about the same amount as Green Lantern in a much less compact layout. That being said, I think it flows much more nicely and has the stronger inversions. This is another very tight category. When it comes to the layouts, I have to call it another tie. Green Lantern would certainly win if it was slightly longer, but Abyss manages to claw itself into the contest with those stronger inversions and the better flow. It remains 2-1 to Abyss. Round 7, the pacing. I think there's no denying that Green Lantern is a slow ride, but it does flow reasonably well for a ride with so many mid-course breaks. It isn't trimmed very much, and the ride flows nicely from element to element. But it certainly is slower than Abyss, and almost doesn't necessarily have the same sense of pace and speed that any standard roller coaster has. That's deliberate, I know, but it certainly means I have to mark it down for pacing. Abyss has another problem. The ride is very interrupted, with the chain lift being partway through the ride. What's particularly notable about this is the way the ride flows in terms of how it tries to build tension. The ride dispatches straight into the famous first drop and inversion in the dark, which are designed to really build up that sense of fear, and then the energy kind of dies as you wait for Gerstlauer's lift hill mechanism to line itself up. I'm giving the point to Green Lantern. While it's certainly the slower pace, its pacing is far more consistent and it actually flows reasonably nicely. Abyss seriously suffers just due to the nature of the ride's layout, and there's a serious lull in its pacing. The contest is level again at 2-2. Round 8, the best moment. In this round we compare the best moment on each ride. If the two coasters were joined together, what would be the best moment on the combined ride overall? On Green Lantern there's an argument to be made for the first drop, but for me the best moment is the dive loop. It has brilliant hang time and just seems to pause upside down for exactly the right amount of time. It's a really spectacular inversion and maybe doesn't get the credit it deserves. On Abyss, I'm actually going with the drop off the chain lift. It's certainly better than Green Lantern's, which loses its pace a little thanks to the trim brakes and the shape of the drop. Abyss's drop is pure ejector. It's really sudden and aggressive, and I love it. But which of the two is the better moment? Frankly, it has to go to Green Lantern. That inversion is really unique and special. I think it also works spectacularly well with the restraint design, really allowing that hang time to be extra thrilling. Green Lantern is in the lead, 3-2. Round 9, my first reaction. In this section we ask the question, which coaster gave me the better first impression after the very first time I rode? And I think there's an obvious answer here, even though it's not entirely the ride's fault. By the time I rode Green Lantern for the first time, I had already experienced Superman and Arkham Asylum, as well as every other credit at the time on the Gold Coast. And I actually thought the ride was just okay. I didn't really have many criticisms, but I just thought it was a fairly average Gold Coast thrill coaster. Abyss very pleasantly surprised me. I had expected the ride to be extraordinarily rough and unpleasant. And while I was right about the roughness, I was more surprised by how forceful the ride had been and how much I was able to enjoy it despite the roughness. I had not expected the power of the airtime or the intensity of the ride experience. I came away with a very high opinion of Abyss. The point goes to Abyss. Green Lantern really didn't impress me anywhere near as much as Abyss did. I was really blown away by that coaster. And so, yet again, a coaster showdown ends in a tie, 3-3. So, the tiebreaker round. What separates these two coasters? Which is the winner? For me, it comes down to a question of intensity. One of these coasters is a true thrill coaster that really gets your heart pounding, while the other teases, but never truly gets into top gear. For me, on the basis of its intensity, Abyss is the winner. The ride really packs a punch that Green Lantern never truly does. I would describe Green Lantern as a much more entry-level thrill coaster, and I don't think it ever quite manages to show what it's capable of in the way Abyss does. And so that wraps it up. Another very close contest, but for me, Abyss is the superior coaster to Green Lantern. Let me know whether you agree or disagree with any of the points I made in the comments below. While you're there, please consider clicking the like and subscribe buttons. If you'd like to become a channel member for exclusive content, shoutouts, and early access to all my videos, click the join button. Shout out this week to TCE. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.